Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. We have a lot to cover on today's show. First up, we're going to be talking about ESPN's Dan Orlovsky saying that the Steelers will start their season 0-6 if this happens for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. Then we'll talk about multiple reports saying to expect Aaron Rodgers to eventually sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Multiple credible reporters are saying that they fully expect Rodgers to eventually sign with the black and gold this offseason. Then we'll talk about some recent comments from Big Ben Roethlisberger and why he thinks Aaron Rodgers needs to sign with the team as soon as possible. Some very interesting comments from Big Ben. And then we'll finish up today's show with how I think the Pittsburgh Steelers view their current wide receiver room. And we'll talk about some potential wide receiver targets to add to that room at the end of today's show as well. So before we get into it today, support our show. Here's a ways that you guys can support our shows in all different kinds of ways. And by the way, all these things are 100% free to do so. All right, you can subscribe to the channel. Click that subscribe button below this video. You can also click the like button. That is the easiest way to help out any of our videos that you watch here on YouTube. You can also give me a follow both on X and on Instagram at Jack_Sperry on X and then at SteelersCS on IG. And you can also share the video. These are all the free ways that you can help out the channel today, guys. So if you just pick 1, 2, or maybe even 3 of these things today, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that, let's get into our first segment today. Talking about Dan Orlovsky, who says that the Pittsburgh Steelers will have a historically bad 0-6 start to their season if they start Mason Rudolph week 1 of the 2025 NFL schedule. What he said exactly was, quote, "I think they're staring 0-6 in the face," unquote, if Mason Rudolph is their starting quarterback this year. So you take a look at the first 6 games here. You got the Jets on the road in week 1. You got the Seahawks in the home opener. Then you travel to Foxborough to take on the Patriots. The Vikings in Dublin. The Browns at home in week 6. And then the Bengals on the road in week 7. Now, I don't think that, there's a lot of cupcakes here, but like the Browns, the Jets, there's a lot of winnable games in these first 6 game stretch here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And even if Mason Rudolph does end up being the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers here, I don't think they're going to go 0-6, all right? Plain and simply. Now, could they go 2-4? Maybe, but 0-6 I think is a bit of a stretch because even though Mason Rudolph, is what he is, he's, I think, a backup level quarterback, he does have a winning record as the Steelers starting quarterback in his career as a Steeler. He's 12-9-1 in his career as the QB1 of the black and gold. So even if Mason Rudolph is the starter for the Steelers here, I do think that they will be hovering somewhere around 500 for most of the season. But I think Orlovsky's point with all this is that the Steelers just aren't going to be a very good football team, or at least not a football team with a very high ceiling if Mason Rudolph is their starting quarterback next season. And let's just keep it 100 here. Let's be real. If Rudolph is the team's starting quarterback next year, they might be around 500. They might even get to 9 or maybe even 10 wins. All right, this team got 10 wins with Rudolph, Trubisky, and Pickett just 2 seasons ago. Crazier things have happened than the Steelers getting 10 wins with Mason Rudolph, especially if this awesome defense can stay healthy. But the ceiling is pretty evident, all right? And that ceiling was really shown 2 years ago when he completed 50% of his passes in a playoff game on the road versus the Buffalo Bills, all right? Mason Rudolph is somebody that is a decent spot starter, but he's not somebody that's going to win you playoff games, especially on the road for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. And you might be saying at home, but Jack, would Aaron Rodgers really be any better? And the answer to that question, my honest answer to that, guys, is I don't know. But what I do know is that Rodgers' ceiling and the upside of signing Rodgers is higher than what you get with Mason Rudolph. With the arm talent and the football intelligence and the pre-snap checks and everything Rodgers brings to the table as a future Hall of Fame quarterback, the Steelers would be hoping to bank in on some of that kind of late career magic that we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers get with Tom Brady, who was 43 years old when he joined their football team and still won another Super Bowl with that organization. The same late career magic that the Vikings got out of Brett Favre in 2009, where he had his worst season of his career at the New York Jets, comes to the Vikings, and he leads them almost to a Super Bowl championship as well. So can I guarantee you that Aaron Rodgers is going to be way better than Mason Rudolph, and this team's going to be way better with Rodgers as their quarterback compared to Rudolph? No, but I do think that the ceiling and the potential for that magic and that lightning to strike is definitely higher retire with Rodgers, which is why, this team is pursuing him instead of just riding with Mason Rudolph at this point in time. And it certainly seems like the NFL community expects Rodgers to eventually sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, all right? Every major reporter out there for every single network says that they think he is signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like literally, pretty much every single one of them. Ian Rappaport from NFL Network said, quote, "I think that he will be a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025. Adam Schefter from ESPN said, quote, "Would think that we get a decision from Rodgers shortly before minicamp," and talking specifically about the Steelers. Mike Florio says, quote, "It will happen," and that he has a source saying that it will happen. And then just this week on the Rich Eisen show, Tom Pelissero from NFL Network had this to say about Aaron Rodgers. "I anticipate Aaron Rodgers is going to end up committing to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's a matter of when, not if. Aaron Rodgers took one visit. It was to the Steelers. Aaron Rodgers has been throwing with one wide receiver out in California this offseason. It is DK Metcalf, who is a member of the Steelers. And Pittsburgh, other than drafting Will Howard late in the draft, they've absolutely operated like a team that anticipates, maybe not knowing 100%, but anticipates that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a member of the Steelers and be their starting quarterback come week 1. We also know this about Aaron. He's never liked offseason workouts. He showed up for a lot of them back during his Green Bay days, but when it comes to the collective bargaining negotiations in 2020, he was the loudest voice saying, quote, "We shouldn't have to do anything until August 1st. There shouldn't be any voluntary stuff. There shouldn't be any mandatory minicamp. August 1st should be the start." So if you're looking for a reason for why Aaron Rodgers hasn't signed on with the Pittsburgh Steelers, despite having his only visit be with the Pittsburgh Steelers, having constant communication with Mike Tomlin, the Steelers head coach, working out with DK Metcalf at UCLA, all these different signs indicating that he's eventually going to sign with the Steelers, the reason why he hasn't done so yet is because he doesn't like the offseason program, and he never has. He has been very vocal, especially against the first 2 phases of the NFL's offseason program, which is pretty much just like lifting, walkthroughs, meetings, that sort of thing. He doesn't like to participate in that sort of stuff. And honestly, he's not the biggest fan of OTAs and mandatory minicamp either. So the question that Steelers fans have on their mind here is, when will he be ready to participate? Because I think if Rodgers, whenever Rodgers is ready to participate, whenever he wants to practice, that's when he's going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's what Tom Pelissero is saying. That's what Ian Rappaport is saying. That's what Adam Schefter is saying. That's what other reporters around the league are saying right now, is that he wants to go to Pittsburgh. It's just a matter of when he wants to start participating in practices is when he's going to sign with the football team. Now, the answer that I would prefer is I would want him there at OTAs, which begin on May 27th. Every opportunity that he has to build that chemistry with his receivers, get acclimated to the offense, the receivers and the offensive line get a chance to learn his cadence and get used to his cadence, which is obviously legendary, and you definitely need to have that communication and chemistry with. I would love for that relationship to start as soon as possible. And Art Rooney II, the owner of the Steelers team here, also agrees with my sentiment there, saying, "I do think we may get word soon, obviously with things starting to crank up here with the offseason program, etc. If Aaron Rodgers is coming, we would like to get him here soon for some of that." So obviously the Steelers would prefer him to be here for OTAs, and actually former Steelers quarterback Big Ben Roethlisberger thinks that OTAs could be very important for Aaron Rodgers, and he thinks that he should sign with the team ASAP if he wants to be a success here in Pittsburgh. This is what Ben had to say about that. Aaron's played in a West Coast system like forever. From what I've been told, this is not a West Coast system. That's verbiage. That's terminology. Aaron is an incredibly smart young man. Well, not young, probably a smart man. He's an incredibly smart man. So, do I think he could pick up the offense? Absolutely. But there's also something to be said about being on the field with guys at practice to see how guys run routes, to do things, to communicate, to let them hear your voice in the huddle, to hear your cadence, to hear your audibles, all that stuff. The coach and you need to get on the same page so that when coach is calling plays, he knows what you like and don't like. And then when you're changing things, he understands why you're changing it and what you're changing it to. So I think I have two thoughts from what Big Ben Roethlisberger had to say there, because there's a lot of truth to what he is saying, but the two things I would kind of push back on is two things. Number one, Arthur Smith does traditionally run a West Coast system. Last year, they didn't really run that style of offense because of Russell Wilson, essentially, and because Najee Harris was not a good outside zone runner, they didn't run a whole lot of outside zone, and because Russell Wilson is used to a shotgun-heavy spread offense, that's the type of offense that they ran. So Arthur Smith wants to run a West Coast system, and if Rodgers does come here, he's going to be running the style of offense that he wants to run. So that shouldn't be a concern from Big Ben Roethlisberger there. Then the second thing is that, everything that he laid out about, maintaining chemistry and building up that chemistry and communication and building up that relationship with the offensive play caller. Training camp in the preseason lasts about a month, all right? Like it's a pretty lengthy amount of time that you practice just about every single day for. And I do think that relationship can be built up over the course of a training camp, and it's not necessarily a necessity that he's there during OTAs for that relationship to be built. But I think that this thing might go all the way up right after OTAs, which is on June 12th. I would not be surprised whatsoever if Rodgers decides, you know what, I don't want to participate in the offseason program. All I need is a training camp. I don't really need to show up during the summer when I've got other things in my life that I want to do. And I'm going to sign like right after OTAs, which mandatory minicamp wraps up on June 12th. So I would kind of expect somewhere around mid-June as around the time that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But it also wouldn't surprise me either if he does want that extra time during OTAs, and that would be my preference. But at this point, it's all about what Aaron Rodgers wants, because that's what the Steelers want right now. Now, when it comes to the line of demarcation, when it comes to when the Steelers should say, we're good, Aaron, we've waited long enough, we're moving on, I think Mike Tomlin laid it out at the owners' meetings this year when he said it was probably training camp was when the team is probably going to have to move on from their pursuit of Aaron Rodgers, and I think that is probably the time where the Steelers, can afford to wait until moving on to somebody else. This is what Tomlin had to say at the owners' meetings earlier in the offseason. He says, in the spring, it's about teaching and learning and getting familiar with players and making sure they get familiar with some of the things that we value. It's not an evaluation time of the year for us. It's certainly not a time of the year where we're focused on readying ourselves for the game action. Certainly, training camp would kind of be a line of demarcation in terms of that discussion. This spring is about teaching and learning. So certainly Mike Tomlin agrees with me that training camp is kind of the point in time that you can really afford to wait for a decision from Aaron Rodgers. But these are kind of the dates that you guys need to know. The start of OTAs is on May 27th. I'm recording this on May 15th, so there's still about 2 weeks until OTAs begin. Could certainly see Rodgers sign before then if he wants to participate. Also, mandatory minicamp is from June 10th through the 12th, so does he maybe sign right before or right after those dates? We'll have to see on that. And then training camp is late July. So I do think the Steelers are probably going to be willing to wait until training camp, but I would probably look for around right after mandatory minicamp for Rodgers to make his decision final, because at that point there's nothing in between mandatory minicamp and training camp for him to extend this wait even further. So let me know down there in the comments section, when do you think Aaron Rodgers will sign with the Steelers, if ever? Do you think he's ever going to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Definitely an interesting discussion for today's pin question. YouTube's going to throw an ad break here in just a few seconds, and I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Fanatics. And while I'm telling you about Fanatics today, let me know what you think is going to happen with the Aaron Rodgers saga this offseason. And with that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Fanatics, where you guys can get a brand new DK Metcalf jersey in your closet today, while you can also help out the channel as well when you use our link, chatsports.com/DK. I'll put that link in the comments and description of today's show. You click that link and you make a purchase. Fanatics sends us part of the proceeds here at Steelers Talk to help us, take care of all the stuff that we need to take care of. Pay rent, keep the lights on, pay for new equipment, improve our graphics, all that different stuff. Every single dollar goes towards that here on our channel. So you guys can get a DK Metcalf jersey for yourself and help us out a little bit here today by going to chatsports.com/DK if you want a DK Metcalf jersey in your closet this season. So now let's talk a little bit here about the current state of the wide receiver room here in Pittsburgh, because I do think that the Steelers have certain roles in mind for the guys that they have in this room that I think are worth discussing as we look towards a potential future where the Steelers could be adding another wide receiver to this room in the weeks and months to come. So we'll start with the number one receiver here, and it's obvious DK Metcalf is the guy that they're bringing in here to be the bona fide number one wide receiver, deep threat, big body that they want to feed most of their targets to. You know, he maybe has a little bit of a limited route tree, but the stuff that he runs is the stuff that Arthur Smith is going to want to get the football to. You know, the goes, the posts, the digs, all these different things, the slants that DK Metcalf is so good at. You know, he's going to be the guy that gets the most targets, and he's really going to be that alpha in the room. And paying him $30 million per season certainly points to that role in the offense. Then we get to the guy that they just brought in Robert Woods, and I expect his role to be more of an early down player. I don't think he's going to be out there on pass-happy downs as much. I think it's going to be more first and second down, where he's going to be asked to be more of a blocker, kind of similar to the Van Jefferson type of role where they asked Van to go out there as kind of a bigger body, run blocker, that did a good job of that, but maybe not the most explosive wide receiver in the world. I think Bobby Trees still has good hands, but certainly not the best route runner in the world. He's not the fastest guy out there anymore, but the one thing that he is that he's a really good blocker, and he's also a really solid veteran that you can depend on. So I think that is kind of the role that they're expecting from him, and the Steelers want to run a lot of two receiver sets. They want to put a lot of multiple tight ends. They want to kind of dabble in using a fullback this year, is my expectation again this year, and a lot of the early down work is going to be two receiver sets, just like we saw from this team last year. So when they go to those early down, kind of run heavy downs, I do think Robert Woods, that's where he's going to get most of his work. That is if the Steelers don't add another wide receiver to this group this offseason. Then when you get into your three wide receiver packages, more in the pass heavy type of situations, that's where I think Calvin Austin III comes into play. And we saw this last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right? He was the guy that came in pass-heavy situations, and he played inside and outside. They would put him at Z, they would put him in the slot, and they would use him as both a manufactured touch guy. They would use him as a yak threat, and he was actually a pretty darn good route runner and deep threat for this team last year. So this team really does believe in Calvin Austin III, and when you watch the film, you can see why. He is consistently getting open. He really took a step forward last year in his route running. He still has blazing speed, which gives him the ability to win vertically and also gives him the ability to run away from people out in space. So I'm hoping that, Calvin Austin III continues his ascent upwards this year. But obviously, because he's so small, you can't really trust him in a run blocking role on early downs. And then when it comes to Roman Wilson, his role is to play the slot specialist, the guy that's going to be in the slot, that's going to be, he's got fantastic acceleration to win short and intermediate, but can also win on those crossers. He's got very reliable hands. Is he ever going to be a number one receiver in this league? No, not in my opinion. But I think that could he be like a Randall Cobb type of slot receiver that's very productive in this league for a very long time? Absolutely, all right? This team clearly is excited about his future. And also, when you are running the football from 11 personnel, Roman Wilson is not afraid to put his face in the fan as a run blocker either, which I think Arthur Smith really appreciates. So in your three receiver sets, you pretty much take Robert Woods off the field entirely. You put Calvin Austin III at Z, and honestly, I think Calvin is at his best on the outside as a Z receiver. A lot of people, because he's small, kind of feel like, oh, he's just a slot receiver. That's not necessarily the case, all right? Like, I think he's actually better on the outside than he is on the inside, and then Roman can be your true slot guy. And these three receivers right here, they can get open for you now, in my opinion. I think that these guys are going to be pretty decent, but obviously, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers could do better than this, all right? I think that they could add another piece to this group. Robert Woods would be a really good depth piece, but somebody that is consistently playing for you on early downs, I just don't know if that's necessarily what I would prefer if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. If I'm the Steelers, I'm trying to get aggressive to add somebody new to this wide receiver room, whether that's Romeo Doubs in a trade with the Green Bay Packers who has experience playing with Aaron Rodgers, whether that's Keenan Allen who can play both outside and inside and is a savvy veteran still available on the free agency market. Dontavian Wicks, super physical run blocker type and a really good route runner. Quentin Johnson that can be kind of a manufactured touch guy and potential route running specialist with his quick feet on the outside. And Jalen McMillan, man, like Jalen is still a very young player that can play inside or out, really good route runner to the short and intermediate levels of the field. I would be fine with all 5 of these wide receivers if the Steelers ended up bringing these guys in this offseason. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Who is your guy on the wide receiver market right now that you want the Steelers to go get? Give me a name down there in the comments section. As always, give me your reasoning for why you want that receiver here in Pittsburgh. Now, before I go here, I know it's been a little bit of a longer one already, but I do have some uniform news here. Steelers owner Art Rooney II, after the schedule release came out earlier this week, he did an interview where he said that in Week 8 versus the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football, they're going to have new alternate throwback uniforms. And then Week 15 versus the Miami Dolphins, they will be bringing out the Color Rush uniforms on Monday Night Football. So just keep that in mind as we approach the 2025 season. But, what really piques my interest here is what throwbacks are they going to be bringing back here for the Pittsburgh Steelers? They certainly have some options here. Of course, they've done the bumblebees in the past, but I would kind of like to see an all-yellow helmet, bringing back that all-yellow helmet type of look. I know it's kind of simple. Maybe you put the numbers on the side in black. I think that would look pretty cool with a throwback kind of home jersey look. I don't know, man. But I think that there's some other options. There's the old Batman look there that they have as well with the number 88 towards the middle of the graphic there with the yellow on the top of the jersey that some people have pointed to as a potential option. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Which throwbacks are you hoping that they wear in Week 8 versus the Green Bay Packers? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers News and Rumors by Chat Sports. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.